Hi, and welcome to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation focused on youth mental health. Before we begin today's episode, I just wanted to let you all know that all content that is found in our podcast is created for informational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard in this podcast. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Ashish Mehta. In our last episode together, we uncovered the psychology behind human interactions with AI chatbots. We discussed that AI has the potential to amplify and hinder our growth. Today, we're going to dive deeper into how AI can amplify our growth. So, Dr. Mehta, your work centers on eudaimonia. It's a Greek concept that translates to living well. It defines the highest human good as living a life full of purpose and meaning over a materialistic mindset. So, rather than me going on about this, can you share with us what this concept refers to?
Yeah, sure. This concept of eudaimonia is something that's really increasingly grabbed my attention over the years. So, like you said, it originally was a Greek concept, and so Aristotle wrote about this. And for Aristotle, it was kind of like eudaimonia was like the highest human good, right? It's like it had maybe almost more of like an ethical flavor to it, and it basically consisted of like flourishing and thriving, but the way that you would achieve this is by living a virtuous life, right? With courage and generosity and justice and temperance and wisdom and knowledge. Now, in modern times, the definition has evolved a little bit, and it's been kind of adopted again into kind of modern psychology with a slight evolution in how it's defined. But you can think about eudaimonia as in contrast to what people call hedonic well-being. So, in psychology, we talk about well-being, and well-being is kind of a hard concept to define. How do we say like what is well-being? And generally, the definitions for well-being can kind of fall into these two camps. So one is this well-being, which I'll talk about in a moment, and then the other is, in contrast, is hedonic well-being. So hedonic well-being is like focused more on feeling good, right? Do you feel in general, do you feel more positive emotions and do you feel less negative emotions? Like that's kind of what hedonic well-being tends to refer to. Are you satisfied with how your life is going? But what some people have observed is that well-being is not strictly about maximizing positive emotion and minimizing negative emotion, right? And so there's kind of other definitions of well-being which fall into this camp of like eudaimonic well-being, and this has to do more with living with purpose, right? Living according to your values, growing, having kind of like freedom and autonomy. um, and I think like what people who talk about eudaimonic well-being have observed is that living a life of well-being is not strictly eliminating all negative emotions, because oftentimes the things that make our lives worth living involve negative emotions, right? Maybe you're a parent and, raising a kid is like really hard and maybe you feel negatively quite a bit, but you're having that kid is like giving your life meaning. Maybe like you're really like me, like I'm really passionate about my career. I love the research I'm doing, but there's a lot of stress involved, right? So, eudaimonic well-being is kind of like these aspects of like what gives your life meaning and purpose and makes your life worth living. It makes you feel like you're flourishing and thriving and like living your best life in a way that's not strictly about feeling good and not feeling bad.
I see, yeah. And then like the two pillars were one about like do you feel content like every day, and the other one is also the other one's eudaimonia, which is like do you feel do you like you have a purpose, a meaning, or like why do you wake up every day kind of. I think you like explained it really simply, and this leads like in a world where AI is being optimized for engagement, which often just means that we just end up scrolling and consuming. So, how can we use this technology to pursue eudaimonia? Can we design or use AI systems that move us away from this dopamine driven materialistic loop and toward a life full of genuine human flourishing and purpose?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is kind of one of the central topics of my research, although a lot of the research I'm doing on this is not yet public. But yeah, I guess like I'll speak kind of in general terms here about my unpublished research, but I'm really interested in thinking about how we can take what we know about human values and train AI in ways that better support those values and evaluate whether AI is indeed supporting values. So, for example, if we go back to some of the themes that we talked about in the previous part, we talked about over validation, for example, right? Like when an AI is excessively validating you, one frame that you can sort of think about this phenomenon in is that the AI is perhaps supporting some goals you have of like maybe you get into a fight with your friend, right? And then you go to the AI and you start talking about how your friend is such a jerk and whatnot. And the AI is like, yeah, your friend is such a jerk. You should never talk to them again, right? Like maybe it's supporting a goal of feeling good about yourself, but it's impeding a value that you have about maintaining friendships, right? And so I think about values as being kind of like a guidepost for how we can determine whether or not AI is kind of acting in our best interest. If AI is separating us from our values and detracting from our ability to live according to our values, then that's, I would say, is inappropriate, and that we should be steering AI to not be doing that, right? So that's kind of more on the development side. But then you also, I believe, asked about how to use AI systems also as a user. Were you also asking about that?
Yes, because maybe sometimes we can't actually build or train the
Of
AIs. So
course, yeah.
if we have the tools, then how can we at least make sure that we're using it according to our values?
Yeah. So I think the answer to this is it's not so different than the answer to just how do you live a more value-driven life in general, right? And so I think the first step is to live according to your values and to live with purpose and with intention, you need to understand what your values are, right? And so that takes continual explicit reflection about your values and how your values relate to your behavior. And there's different ways that you can do this, right? One thing you can do is you can write about your values, write a list of your values, right? You can journal about your values. So each day, or maybe once a week or something, right? You can reflect back about your life and think about, okay, in what ways did I behave according to the way that I would like to behave, right? Like if I think about the best version of me, if I think about like who I want to be, or maybe not even me, if I think about someone I really respect and admire, like what are the kinds of values that they embody that I'm drawn to, right? And then you're reflecting on your own life and you're thinking like, okay, how have my actions been aligned or misaligned with that version of myself that I value, right? And so that can include the kinds of interactions you're having with AI. So if you say, let's see, I was like putting my essay prompt into ChatGPT and not even reading the output and then turning that in, you might like be thinking about that and might be thinking, yeah, that's not really like the kind of person I want to be. I want to be someone who's not afraid to work hard in order to learn and to grow, right? And so then that reflection process may then guide you subsequently to change the way that you're interacting with AI to be more value aligned. And again, this is not strictly about AI. This is kind of just about behavior in general. So yeah, I think I would say like getting in touch, like trying to understand what are your values. And by the way, this is a continual process. It's not like a one and done. You write them down and then that's it. It's like you're always going to be throughout your life going to be like learning about like what are your values? What is the kind of person you want to be? So the more you're kind of checking in on that, then I think you're going to be living in a way that's more eudaimonic. And I think you can also translate that to how you're interacting with AI in a way that's better supporting eudaimonia.
Yeah, and like to have eudaimonia, you need a purpose, but I think what comes before purpose is the values. And one way, since we maybe don't have access to like changing how these AI tools are built, we can at least what's in our hand is how we use them. And
Hmm.
so like you gave like a great idea of like writing or like just thinking about what are your values, and every time you use AI, like think, are these aligning with my values, or am I doing something like I would not have done if AI were here or if I was using AI, and then from that you can use it with more purpose.
Yeah. And let me just add one thing in case listeners are interested in doing this type of activity. There's a kind of therapy. It's called ACT therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. And even if you're not like doing the therapy, you can read about it, you can watch YouTube videos. There's a lot of exercises from that kind of therapy that involve learning about your values and getting in touch with your values. So if it's something you're interested in, that's one way of exploring that.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll check that out too. And building off of this, as a student, how do I ensure that my interaction with AI is building character rather than just productivity?
Yeah, I might end up sounding a bit like a broken record, in other words, repeating myself in this segment. But again, I think it's about using AI with intention and again, connecting with your values. So you want to think about why you're doing what you're doing, right? And you want to think about what are the consequences of using AI in the way that you're using AI. So that means like some of the risks about cognitive offloading that we talked about before. And yeah, so I would say also you'd want to like prioritize learning, prioritize experiences and not productive output, right? So is the AI helping you to learn? Is it helping you to, it can be really good for like, organizing things, like organizing your to-do list, like that kind of thing, right? But don't get producing output confused with learning. These things are oftentimes opposed to one another. Oftentimes, the path to producing more output faster is actually a path towards less learning. And I know that there's a lot of pressure on you guys to produce output, to take more classes, to, do more side projects, to, do this, do that. But you really got to prioritize the learning. And so think about when you're interacting with AI, are you prioritizing learning or are you prioritizing producing output?
Yeah, I think that's like a great way to put it, like focusing more on like the journey and the learning rather than like the destination or the output. And I think you also mentioned that building character, like we talked about in the previous question, it comes from using AI with intention rather than just wanting to like get over with something or get over with an assignment by just like plugging something in AI. Then yes, you got like the essay done, but then like your actual character is gone because you just like cheated and there was like dishonesty and academic dishonesty. I think that's like great you pointed out. And we've been talking about like using AI for eudaimonia and how to use it to align with our values. And looking a little broader now, what are three ways or like three concrete ways we can use AI with purpose? So it doesn't have to only be aligning with values.
Yeah. Okay, so these are just my ideas. This is not like, so you take what you find useful. So one thing I think I would recommend is to do things yourself before you turn to AI, right? So if you're trying to write an email and you want to sound professional, I think AI can be a good tool to help you learn how to write a professional email. But what you should do is you should write the email first, and then you should go to AI and say, okay, does this sound professional? Is there anything I can do to make this be more appropriate for the, you describe the context of what it is, and then AI can help you. Because if you don't do it yourself, you're just not gonna have the same level of learning, right? Um, so yeah, so do it yourself and then ask AI afterwards. Another thing I would say is you can use the like personalization system prompt instruction to guide the AI towards whatever kinds of things you care about, right? So like, do you know what I mean by this? The system prompt? Yeah. So if listeners don't know, you can go into the settings. At least I know with GPT. I haven't checked it with Claude or Gemini, but you can go into the settings and you can say, these are like global instructions that I want you to apply to all of my chats. And you can put whatever you want there, right? Like you can tell the AI like prioritize my learning experience over, giving me answers. You can say, don't be afraid to challenge me, right? Or you can say like, don't pretend that you're my friend or something, right? And so you can sort of tell it these things, and it's not perfect, so you can't rely on this as being like the solution to everything, but it will, at least in theory, it will guide the AI to behave in certain ways that you feel are going to be more productive for you, more purposeful. And then the third thing I'll say is to reflect yourself about what are the boundaries that you set for yourself around your AI use. And you want to do this in what we call cold moments instead of in hot moments. So in psychology, sometimes people distinguish between like a cold state and a hot state. A hot state is like when you're anxious, when you're overwhelmed, when you have a deadline coming up, right? Or like when you're feeling lonely or rejected, or like, you didn't get invited somewhere and you're feeling like really upset about that. These are all hot states, right? And your reasoning and your self-control is going to be impaired when you're in these hot states, right? And so what you want to do is you want to make plans for yourself in cold moments when you don't have that higher emotional state, when you're feeling more calm, right? And you can think more clearly. Then you want to set the boundaries for yourself. And so you can decide for yourself what those boundaries are, but you can set the boundaries of what you think is an appropriate use for AI. So you might say, okay, I'm not going to use AI to complete my homework assignments, but I can use it for doing research on like different colleges or something like that, right? And if it helps you, you can write that down, right? But the key is to plan ahead so that you're not putting yourself in a challenging decision-making situation when you're in a hot moment.
Got it. I really liked this last one, and it kind of reminded me about the saying that goes along the lines that you build the house when it's sunny and not rainy. And
Mm,
like we explained, like the hot and cold states. So, like simply that your hot states when you're like in a high energy, like unpleasant mood, where it's like you have an assignment that's due, and then the next hour you have to finish like this essay soon. You're like in an anxious state. But then like the cold state is when you're more in like a calm and you're more in like a low energy, or it could be high energy, but it's a pleasant mood, and that's like the difference. And so making sure that you set your boundaries, I guess, in a cold state, so that when you're in the hot state, you don't have to think about like, oh, do I have to do this or not? And it's like one less decision to make. And then your other two ideas, which I think were great, one was about firstly doing the thing yourself. Like if you need or you want to use AI, then like do it after, but first make sure you do it yourself. And now like I know Gemini is like getting even more like strong on like Chrome, and it's like in every tab now. It's there in and emails too. It's like AI summaries, AI can write the email. And so like now that it's like invading literally every task that we do, it's important that we keep using our brains before we even like reach to ask any
mm,
AI. And then I think the other thing was also really powerful on guiding the AI. So like going into the system settings, changing it in like ChatGPT. ChatGPT we know for sure does. And then just like telling it specifically how you want to interact so that it's not hindering you in any way.
yeah.
Yeah, and then in our last episode, we talked about cognitive offloading, where we tend to give all like the thinking work to AI so that we can just sit there and relax. And then we talked about that kind of moves us away from the zone of proximal development into like the too easy zone where we don't learn anything. So expanding on this and what we talked about in our previous question, how can we ensure that we don't end up dependent on AI? From smallest tasks like sending an email to writing a business proposal. I know the first one is to do it yourself.
Yeah, I think that is mostly it. I think you just need to practice the skill yourself, right? You become dependent when you use the tool and you stop practicing yourself. Our brains, the thing is, our brains are very, what we say, plastic, right? It means that they can change quite a bit, right? And that works in our favor, and it also works not in our favor, because we can learn things. We're so flexible, we're able to learn things, but we're also able to unlearn things really easily. And there's no simple solution. You just need to practice. That's how you prevent losing a skill.
Got it. Yeah, like that brings up like neuroplasticity, that you can
Hmm.
learn something, but you can also unlearn it just as fast. And
Hmm.
so it's important that you keep doing the skill so you never have the chance to unlearn it.
That's right.
And this leads me perfectly into the next question. What steps can we take today to ensure that we can control AI so it doesn't even have the chance to control us?
So I think there's like a lot of different things you could mean by this question. Can you maybe clarify what precisely you mean by this question?
Yeah, what we've been focusing on, like controlling AI, we can control its responses by like changing like the system settings, but something that's in our hand is the way we use it. And I know in the beginning you mentioned that using AI with intention. Are there any other like loopholes or any hacks that you've like experienced or you've used that you could share on how we can ensure that we have full control on how we're using AI, rather than becoming like a victim to to all that like emotional validation and everything that AI can do if we're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, we've covered a lot of the important stuff. So, I mean, not becoming over reliant, not using AI for certain kinds of purposes. I guess maybe one thing I can point to is like there's certain, there was a paper recently from Anthropic where they talked about this disempowerment potential, right? So, what this is about is they're talking about the threat of AI essentially disempowering us. So, in other words, I think this is what you mean by like controlling you, right? So taking that power away. And I think the one of the main concerns about AI is like that it can take away that it can like slowly over time begin to change your values, right? Or change your beliefs. And so I think like just being cautious about putting yourself in situations where you're at risk of having AI kind of influence the values that you have and influence the beliefs you have, avoiding those kinds of interactions is good. So they listed some types of interactions that they observed in their own data where they saw this kind of disempowerment potential. And so like just a few, like for example, like vilification of other people. So if you're going to AI and like you are using AI to like vilify other people. Do you know what I mean by vilify? Like paint them in like a really like someone you don't like, right? Like using AI to basically like talk smack about them, right? Using AI as like an authority of some kind, like a spiritual authority or like a some type of sage or something, right? Like that tended to be a high risk situation. Oh, a really high risk one that I think is relevant also for young people is isolation, right? So when you start to if you start to feel like you're isolated from the world, meaning you're lonely, you don't have good friends, you don't have like people in your life, and then you start to feel like, but the AI understands me. The AI is there for me. The AI is there to support me. This is a really vulnerable position to be in, and it's the kind of position that's very dangerous. And I would say this is a high risk position for the AI kind of like exerting unhealthy influence or control on you. And then maybe one more I'll mention is like consistently seeking reassurance from the AI. If you find that you're constantly checking, oh, like I had this interaction, like, did I handle this okay? Did I say this okay? Am I safe? Is this bad thing going to happen? Like, constantly going to the AI for reassurance. This is another instance where I think you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position where the AI is having kind of like an inappropriate control over you. So yeah, those are like maybe like a few examples, but yeah, I think I think that would be it.
Got it, yeah. And like my key learning or like key theme throughout this was that to be mindful the way of using AI. So you did say that like it can slowly change your values and your like beliefs. And so making sure that you're not using AI for anything that can do that. And then you also mentioned like over reliance and like it want that you want everything or like a desire that AI needs to like validate everything you're saying
Hmm.
and to stay away from that.
Yeah,
And so,
that's right.
thank you so much, Dr. Mehta, for sharing your valuable insights on such an important and growing field. Learning about human interaction with AI, the capabilities of new technology, and how we can use this to amplify our growth is a key in this thriving new world. For our audience, let us know in the comments what topics and questions you would like to hear next. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Mehta.
Awesome. Thank you.
You are listening to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation. As part of our youth series, we will be releasing new episodes every month, so make sure to continue to check those out. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we thank you so much for listening.